Welcome, marketing chefs. I've got something truly special cooking for you on our storytelling stovetop today. It is my review, spoiler review, of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Up next in the Marketing Kitchen. Welcome back, marketing chefs. I've got something truly special cooking for you on our storytelling stovetop today. It is the spoiler review of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I'm Ron Vining, your host, and this is Marketing Kitchen TV. All right, let me get straight away to this for you. Again, this is a spoiler review. Last time, final time. I won't say it again. Okay, I will. It's a spoiler review of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Let's put this in quick context. In 1977, I saw Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, on the big screen. I have been a Star Wars fan since 1977. I've grown up with Star Wars. I don't know everything there is to know about Star Wars. I'm not one of those Star Wars fans, not that there's anything wrong with it. I am primarily a fan of the films, animated series. I've read a few of the novels, but I pretty much stick to canon. So outside of canon, you won't find that I am that knowledgeable. I did, of course, read the Heir to the Empire trilogy after Return of the Jedi, but of course that all changed when Disney bought Lucasfilm, and the Star Wars IP was reset when what used to be known as the Expanded Universe became Legends. All right. Anyway, that's just want to sum up where I'm coming from before I say much more. Let's even very quickly, let's talk original trilogy. Original trilogy, Empire Strikes Back, is my favorite film. Let's talk prequel trilogy. I would say that actually The Phantom Menace is my favorite film because it set a fantastic, I love politics, so maybe that's why, but I believe that it set up a nice groundwork or foundation for the universe that Episode 4, 5, and 6, that's New Hope, which is the original Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi herald from. I believe The Phantom Menace was a great foundation for that. I think that the acting suffered in Attack of the Clones, but again, the narrative fit the story. It adhered to the brand values of Star Wars. And then the Revenge of the Sith, which was Episode 3, I thought was excellent. I enjoyed that story. And I believe it was a good handoff to, and if that was the final Star Wars film ever, it was a good handoff to Episodes 4, 5, and 6. Okay, that's my summary for that. When it comes to Disney-owned Star Wars, well, I enjoyed The Force Awakens, but I would have done a number of things differently. But I'm not J.J. Abrams, I'm not Kathleen Kennedy, and I'm not Bob Iger, and none of them hired me to put episodes 7, 8, and 9 together. And why would they? They wouldn't. So fine, not a problem. I'm a consultant, but that's not what I consult on. I do have this channel though, so I can speak my mind. I probably, having not read them, would have gone along with the story treatments that George Lucas had prepared, seeing as he had re-signed Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford to reprise their roles as Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo. And I believe that if I were Disney, I would have gone along with those story treatments, having had J.J. Abrams or someone of his caliber direct that trilogy. If I were Bob Iger, rather than rush to put material into the marketplace to recoup the $4.2 billion spent on Lucasfilm, I would have taken the Lord of the Rings approach, and I would have had a single director film back to back to back all 3 films, and then spent a year in between doing the special effects. Why? For continuity. But that, again, I was not asked to do, and I guess I'm also looking backwards, right? So maybe that's unfair. But that's what I would have done, and that's what I actually thought in the beginning before I saw The Force Awakens and when it had been announced. So I was surprised that they had actually taken that approach and then confused not fans, but confused casual audiences by then releasing standalone stories in between. But let's talk Disney Star Wars after I've just said that. I enjoyed The Force Awakens. I thought that Rogue One was actually a more compelling story. I disliked The Last Jedi, and I've written about this extensively, and you can go to my LinkedIn profile here and you can read a blog post that I wrote called Revenge on the Last Jedi Fans, and that'll tell you where I'm coming from in terms of brand values and perspective, okay? And then I enjoyed Solo. It was a movie that I didn't feel was necessary, but I found enjoyable. The timing of that release was bad. That film should have been released in December. Once, going again for those not in the know or don't pay attention to these things, Lucasfilm Star Wars, all of those films came out in May. Disney Star Wars, all the films came out in December, with the exception of Solo, which came out in May. It should have been released in December. It was in a very crowded space with Deadpool 2, with Endgame, Infinity War, and it just was not, it was just bound to fail where it was at, especially following The Last Jedi. Okay, what you've been waiting for. You had a chance to leave, but you didn't. It's my spoiler review of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And I love this poster because it harkens back to what was originally supposed to be Revenge of the Jedi, which became Return of the Jedi. All right. I'm glad that J.J. Abrams is back because he gets to finish his story that was started in The Force Awakens. And what I really did enjoy about The Force Awakens was the setup. I enjoyed the setup of a new big bad in Snoke. I enjoyed the introduction of Kylo Ren being a torn figure between wanting to be like his grandfather, but feeling the pull to be like his mother. And his grandfather, of course, being Darth Vader or Anakin Skywalker. I liked how Rey was introduced, and I like how Finn was introduced. What I did not like about The Force Awakens was that I didn't feel that Han Solo needed to die, and he didn't need to die the way that he did. I also don't like that Rey bested Kylo Ren in a battle, even though Kylo Ren was wounded, even though Kylo Ren, so he was physically wounded by the blaster shot that he took from Chewbacca's bowcaster, which we saw to have significantly, it was significantly more powerful a weapon than we had ever seen before. And that was to show us that he had taken a really bad hit to the hip. So he was physically wounded, and he was emotionally wounded because he had just killed his father at the request of Supreme Leader Snoke. And even with those two things being in our factors, I felt that immediately having had Rey best him in the film didn't create the necessary tension going into a sequel. But that happened, so I lived with it. We then saw at the end of The Force Awakens Rey hand the lightsaber, or about to Luke Skywalker, and then the film ended. And I understand why they kept Luke a mystery and why he was just revealed at the end, because that was going to be, we had Han Solo as the Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Qui-Gon Jinn of the first film, and then we were going to have Luke Skywalker be that same archetypal figure for The Last Jedi. That was until Rian Johnson decided to turn that film on its head, turn the brand and the narrative consistency of the 7 films that had come before it upside down. And in The Last Jedi, we didn't see characters like Poe, Rey, and Finn develop. We saw Luke sort of burn to the ground, his image, and we saw Snoke, who was built up to be the big bad, just be axed. And that, to me, was very disappointing. When The Last Jedi ended and Luke surrendered himself to the Force and moved on, I was deeply disappointed. I was deeply disappointed with the scenes of Leia floating through space. If we were going to show great Force powers for her, there needed to be a better way to do that. And again, I'm not in the position to say what that better way was, but it just didn't sit well with me. So here we are, episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. There was a huge task that J.J. Abrams had in front of him. There was backlash that Lucasfilm needed to deal with as a result of The Last Jedi and how fans were treated. And this was the final story in a 3 trilogy saga. And this was billed as the end of the Skywalker saga. So this was an almost Mission Impossible, which J.J. Abrams directed one of and did a fantastic job at. That was Mission Impossible 3, which was actually one of my favorite, and actually I think it still is my favorite of the Mission Impossible films. So he had another Mission Impossible. The Force Awakens wasn't a Mission Impossible because they had brought back Lawrence Kasdan. They did have the story treatments of George Lucas to pick from. They did have the expanded universe to pick from. And it borrowed heavily from what had happened before. So that was an easier film, in my opinion anyway, to launch. Coming on the heels of The Last Jedi, this movie had nowhere to go. The Empire Strikes Back had set up so much tension for Return of the Jedi. Attack of the Clones had set up tension for Revenge of the Sith. The Last Jedi almost felt like a final movie. So now where do we go? And I must say, and here is the spoiler review, after 15 minutes or so of me just yapping away as a setup, J.J. Abrams and co-writer Chris Terrio, they hit a almost grand slam. I would say that they accomplished what they needed to accomplish because we received, and here again are the spoilers, we saw what we wanted to see out of The Force Awakens, and that was the Knights of Ren, all 6 of them. And they had some, they played an integral part in the story. We saw Rey, Poe, and Finn develop as characters. We saw them interact with each other. We felt, and when I say we, then I'm me, but I could feel that from the audience as well too. I got the sense anyway that we cared about these characters again. because we cared about them in The Force Awakens, we didn't care about them in The Last Jedi because the story didn't ask us to. This story did. And of course, we had Leia, who was brought back from unused footage and reused footage, I believe, from The Force Awakens, and perhaps dialogue as well too, lifted from some cut scenes where we didn't see her face, but she was speaking off screen, if you will. And we saw Kylo Ren's character develop as well. All right, let me get started with some points of the story for you and tell you why I enjoyed the film and where it worked, and then we'll just touch on a few areas where it didn't work. Now, I was able to see the Singapore premiere, and that means that I'm seeing it 2.5 days before most people in the US or the rest of the world will get a chance to see it, so I'm pretty excited about that. I plan to see the film a couple of more times, and maybe I will do a follow-up review as well, but this is my initial reaction, okay? The film starts out exactly as it needed to. Kylo Ren so the opening crawl immediately tells us that the Emperor is alive and that he has called out to the galaxy and that he is planning to put into effect his revenge, if you will, on the galaxy. And that Kylo Ren is searching for him because he sees him to be a threat to his empire, which is the First Order. So again, spoilers here, go away. I don't want to ruin this movie for you, so don't listen if you haven't seen the film yet. So the story after the opening crawl sets out with Kylo Ren on his way to find Palpatine. And he does this by, and you saw in the trailers, where he's fighting on a planet, taking out some characters. And he does this because he's looking for an artifact. He's looking for a wayfinder. And by the way, the Praxis leaks, I believe that they were called, from Reddit were 100% true. All of this talk and these rumors about there being multiple cuts of the film, a Kathleen Kennedy cut, a Bob Iger cut, a J.J. Abrams cut, a George Lucas cut, is bullcrap. You know why? Because what I just watched on screen is everything that I read about a year ago from Reddit. So that leak of the script that was John Boyega's was 100% what I saw on film. The ordering has changed a bit, so there were some tweaks to the story, but that is what I saw. So all of the drama, I don't believe to be true. The last minute reshoots and editing of special effects were to tighten up the story. So anyhow, Kylo Ren finds the Wayfinder. He then, by using the Wayfinder, hooks it up to his TIE fighter, and he goes to this planet called Exegol, I believe. It's it's sort of just a very dark world in the edge of known space. And there he finds the Emperor. And in one of the final trailers we saw, you hear the Emperor speaking, and he speaks in his voice, Snoke's voice, and then in Darth Vader's voice. And he says that the voices in your head have all been me. And that scene is one of the first scenes you'll see in the film. And I believe that that was important to do to set that up immediately. We see a cloning chamber where we see multiple Snokes. So Palpatine created Snoke. It was Palpatine's presence, we assume, in the body of Snoke, calling all of the shots to develop this First Order. But the Emperor reveals to Kylo Ren, who is Supreme Leader Kylo Ren now, that he is going to turn over his fleet of Sith Star Destroyers and Sith Troopers to Kylo Ren, provided he destroys Rey. And because she is a Jedi, and once the Jedi are wiped out, the Emperor's final order can move forward. But he warns Kylo Ren that Rey is not what she seems to be. And so Kylo Ren had threatened Palpatine several times that he was going to kill him. And Palpatine, by the way, is blind. Palpatine is hooked up to a mechanical arm and cannot really move much on his own. Some of his fingers are missing. He's in rough shape, but he's alive. And so then Kylo Ren sets off to find and kill Rey, because that's what Palpatine asked him to do. Or so that's what we think anyhow. Again, I'm trying to remember what happened in the film. I only saw it one time, and just so many thoughts are going through my head. But I thought that was the perfect way to open up this particular story. I'm not going to go over the entire thing, but I think that was important to go through. We see I'm just going to hit some key beats here. Another key beat is we see Rey training with Leia, which again we had read about I had read about anyway in the leaks. And this was important because it establishes, and Rey refers to her as Master Leia. Rey says that she's not worthy yet of her brother's lightsaber, and this is the Anakin Skywalker saber, and so she gives it back to Leia. We see that Poe and Finn and Chewie are on a mission together, and in the new Rise of Skywalker Millennium Falcon, there's this character called Bulio. He's this character right here. He actually is working in conjunction with somebody in the First Order who's leaking information. So our characters get this information, and they narrowly escape to bring that back to the Resistance, or what's left of the Resistance. And in fact, when you watch The Mandalorian Chapter 7 on Disney+, there's a special sneak preview, which is that particular scene. So you can check that out. So when they get back to the Resistance base, Poe and Rey have some tension with each other, because Poe says, we need you out there, not here training. We need you out on the front lines. And Rey says that she needs to be training, but she does agree with Poe, and so they say that they'll go on their next mission together. Kylo Ren actually speaks to Rey through the Force, and Rey sees a vision. And Kylo Ren is actually saying that he wants to work with her to help defeat Palpatine, and that he knows her past, etc. Well, Rey's not sure that she believes that, but the information anyway that the spies have given to Poe and Finn and Chewie is of this planet Exegol, which Rey remembers reading from the journals. So the Journal of the Wills, if you recall, from The Last Jedi that Rey had taken before Yoda sent a lightning bolt to destroy the Last Jedi temple there, which was that force tree that was hollowed out. Anyhow, so she goes through the books and she reads about the Wayfinder. And then C-3PO mentions that he was able to do some of the translations. He remembered some of the story. And so they're then off on a mission, I believe that's the planet of Pasaana, to find a clue to the Wayfinder, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyway, so we get our entire crew back together. Everyone says bye to Leia, and off they go in the Falcon to Pasaana. When they get to Pasaana, they are recognized by, actually this is when Rey has a vision as well too, or not a vision, but that force link between she and Kylo identifies where she's at, because now when they force link with each other, they can actually reach in and touch one another. They can harm each other through that force link, even though they're not together, which is interesting. It's different. We find out later that Rey and Kylo Ren are actually part of a dyad, so they create a very unique bond in the Force that only happens every so many hundreds of generations, according to Palpatine, whatever that might have been. Anyway, on this Pasaana planet, Kylo takes something from Rey. They analyze it, so Kylo Ren and his forces, the Knights of Ren, are on their way, and the Knights of Ren look pretty darn cool, by the way, are on their way to Pasaana. a sort of transporter, a ground-based sort of tank, almost a sand crawler, but lower in level, comes and somebody yells, "Come with me," to help them get away from the First Order troops that were there. And it turns out to be Lando Calrissian. And it was really great to see Billy D. Williams back and reprising his role. They treated the character of Lando quite well in this film, so I was impressed by that. Let's see, Lando knows about the tale of where this clue is that they're looking for to find the Wayfinder. It's an old Sith ship, and so they go and they find the spot in the desert where this is at. Just like the leaks, Rey and the team are sucked into this like quicksand. They're in a ditch. What happens there is that a giant like snake-like creature is going to attack them. The thing is wounded. Rey heals the wound. And it was interesting that The Mandalorian Chapter 7 dropped today, because in that episode, and here's a spoiler for Mandalorian Chapter 7, so don't listen to this if you don't want to know, the Yoda baby actually heals somebody there. So I believe they were dropping that so that wasn't a surprise, or to set up that this has happened before. I'm not sure. But I believe that was one of the intentions for dropping that. Also, it's good, I guess, promo for The Rise of Skywalker, that they had a promo for it in The Mandalorian as well, too. Anyhow, the creature lets them escape. They escape, they find the ship. Rey recognizes this ship. This is the same ship that dropped her off when she was a child. They find in the ship a Sith dagger. The dagger is written in a Sith language that C-3PO could translate. However, his programming does not allow him to do so for whatever reason. And so he cannot translate it. Rey hears a TIE fighter coming. She goes outside, and that's the scene that we've seen in the very first trailer, where Kylo Ren's TIE fighter is approaching her in the desert. Finn and the gang get this old Sith ship ready to fly because they know that the Falcon will already have been under siege, so they can't go back to it, so they're going to try to escape the planet here. And so Chewie goes to go outside to get Rey, and what ends up happening is Chewie ends up being captured by the Knights of Ren. And so Finn goes outside, he witnesses this, he's yelling to Rey, he tells Rey that Chewie is on, remember the drop ships from The Force Awakens, from the very first scene, that Finn was on? Well, one of those similar types, a bit more modern looking, I thought anyhow, so it was a bit more sleek. Or maybe I just have the Lego version in my mind. Anyway, that ship, it's taking off. So Rey actually Rey first stops Kylo Ren's TIE fighter from that scene that we saw. She cuts it, it ends up crashing. She then uses the Force, and she's pulling that transport out of the sky. Well, when Kylo Ren comes, he survived the crash, obviously. He then using his Force power to try to block Rey from pulling the ship back down to the ground. Rey gets so frustrated from this that all of a sudden lightning comes out of her hand and she destroys the ship. So Rey has Force lightning abilities. And if we know from, and it also is the color, I guess, of her Force power. But anyway, not a good sign, because we've not seen very many Jedi use Force lightning. Obviously, Master Yoda did, but in a different context, I believe. So anyhow, Rey ends up getting aboard the ship and taking off, and then Kylo Ren wonders, what happens next. Anyway, Palpatine is not happy that she gets away. They end up going to a planet, I think it started with an N, I forgot the name of it. This is the ice planet we see in the trailer. It looks a little bit like Batuu, which is the Galaxy's Edge, but it's not. That's where Zori Bliss, the character who is in the purplish outfit with the gold helmet is at, portrayed by Kerry Russell. Finn and she have a relationship together. That's where the little furry creature is there. They need to reboot C-3PO's memory in order to access the ability for him to translate the code. That's when he gets the Sith eyes. He says where the clue is to find the Wayfinder, and we learn that it is on one of the moons of Endor. And or Endor itself, I don't recall, but that's of course where the ruins of the Death Star are. And so off they go and then they reboot C-3PO, and he actually reboots to day one. So that's when he first introduces himself. He doesn't remember anyone else. Kylo Ren and Knights of Ren are on that planet. They're hunting them down. They need to escape. Kerry Russell's character, Zori Bliss, she gives Poe a code which will allow their ship access onto Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer, which is in orbit. So they, in the ship that they had taken from Pisana, that Sith ship that Rey was on as a child, they take that ship aboard to Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer, which this is all really cool, by the way. So I don't know if my description is good. I don't know if you want to hear me describe it scene by scene, but everything so far is great. There's action. It's intense. I have no problem with everything that's happened up to this moment. When they get aboard Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer, they decide to, Rey senses, she senses Darth Vader's mask, I believe, and so she splits up, and so Rey, Chewie, and so Poe, Finn, and Chewie go off to Poe and Finn go off to find Chewie, and they leave. Also Dio's been introduced, by the way, and Dio is really cute. I really like the character of Dio. That's the little droid with the one wheel. So Poe and Finn go off to find Chewie. Rey goes to find what she senses, and of course that was Darth Vader's helmet. She finds the Sith dagger, and so she's going to take that with her. And by touching that and being in that room, Kylo makes the Force connection with her. Now he's down on the planet that Kylo Ren's shuttle is orbiting, and he's trying to figure out where she is. And through that Force link, he ends up finding that out. He then says, "Lock down the ship," and I'm coming there. And anyway, make a long story short, we see the scene where Kylo Ren is in the hangar with all of the troopers, and Rey jumps off onto the Falcon. Well, what had happened is the Falcon had been captured when it was on Pisana, when our heroes left it behind, and it's aboard there. So Finn, Chewie, and Poe, C-3PO with his new rebooted memory, BB-8 and Dio are all aboard the Falcon. They pull up to the hangar that Rey is in, where she's been confronted by Kylo and a ton of troopers, and Kylo's pleading with her to join him. Throughout the film, Kylo Ren is saying, "I want you to join me." And also, too, you're getting a sense that Kylo Ren is not on the side of Palpatine at all, but who knows whether we can trust him. Rey makes the jump, she gets on the Falcon, they take off, and they're on their way to go to the route to the Endor system to find the Death Star, so that she can find a Wayfinder, so that she can get to Exegol, so that she can kill the Emperor. That's the plan. And Kylo Ren says, "I will take you to Exegol," but no. So, make a long story short, Rey goes off on her own. She's aboard the Death Star. She enters the throne room. I'm amazed that it's intact to the condition that it is, but it was a massive structure. The Death Star itself, the Palpatine's throne room, was on a very long tower that extended out. I mean, think about the world's tallest building. That was jetting out from the the circumference of the Death Star. So had there been an explosion, as there was, then it's not outside of the realm of possibility that would have been ejected from the surface and survived in the condition that it was. All right, anyway, I'm making excuses, but I think it works. Anyway, Rey finds a secret hatch in the throne room. She goes in, and that's where she then finds another Wayfinder. She then sees the dark vision of herself that we saw in the trailer, and that dark vision tells her to embrace who she really is and not to fight it. And so Rey, by the way, has been torn throughout this film because she's seeing herself as a dark character. And again, the story's all working for me. I have no problem with it at all. It's action-packed. The film is very well cut. They say that an okay story is turned into a great one in the editing bay, and I know just from editing these bad videos of mine here that a good edit can turn a bad video into a decent one. And I'm not saying I'm a good editor, and I'm certainly not good at doing these videos. Anyway, when she exits out of that room, she drops the Wayfinder, and because she was escaping from that dark vision, and who's there to pick it up? Kylo Ren. And so Kylo Ren crushes it and says, the only way you're getting to Exegol is with me. Let us go to Exegol together, and we will defeat Palpatine. And then I want you by my side. And so he's like, Rey, I know who you are, and you need to embrace who you are. And so they banter a little bit. They get into a lightsaber duel together, and Kylo reveals to her that she's a Palpatine. And they could have. So she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. They could have set that up a little bit better. I mean, it was. I knew it from leaks, or I had heard it anyway, and I speculated. It seemed to make sense based on how the story was going. But I really think that they could have made that a bit more of a major reveal. The lightsaber duel continues out onto the surface of the Death Star, where we see all the waves that are there. There's a scene where actually Kylo Ren defeats Rey. I mean, it's about time, but he clearly had more training than she did. He was a descendant of Anakin Skywalker. We now understand why she was so powerful. She's a descendant of Palpatine. But anyhow, he finally defeats her. And just as he's about, and it's not that he was going to take her out, but Leia says, Ben. And so Kylo stops for a minute. And in the time that he stops and he drops his lightsaber, Rey takes his lightsaber and she stabs him with it. And by killing him, she also then killed Leia, because Leia's last act of life was reaching out to Ben to change his heart. And so that's why Kylo was not going to strike down Rey. And so Leia collapses. Kylo is there sitting, dying. And so rather than die, also Rey feels Leia's presence. And so Rey touches Kylo Ren, and she uses her power to heal him and brings him back to life. And touching moment, but Rey then runs to where Kylo's lightsaber is parked. TIE fighter is parked. It's a different TIE fighter this time, and she takes off on it. Poor Kylo, he's lost 2 TIE fighters already now. All right, anyway, so he takes off. But he's a supreme leader. He can afford some. We see the Emperor then now realizes that Palpatine, so Palpatine realizes that Kylo Ren is lost to him. So then he speaks to the new Allegiant General Price, Pride rather, sorry, Allegiant General Pride. And oh, I left out a part that it ends up that that Hux was actually betraying. He was the one giving the information to the Resistance. Not that he wanted the Resistance to win, but that he didn't want Kylo Ren to succeed. Anyway, General Pride there figures this out. He actually kills Hux. And then we see that Pride is actually answering to the Emperor. He had actually served the Emperor back in the time of the Empire, and he is now serving his master again. So we see that scene. Rey ends up on Ahch-To, by the way, and there she destroys the TIE fighter. And just as she's about to throw the Anakin's lightsaber into the fire, Force Ghost Luke grabs the lightsaber, stops it from going into the fire, and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" Luke then says that he was wrong for how he acted on Ahch-To before. It was fear that drove him there, and we know from comic books that fear was actually Palpatine putting thoughts in his head, etc. And so Luke gives Rey a good pep talk. Luke takes Rey to a spot on Ahch-To where actually Leia's lightsaber is there, and then Luke tells a story, and we get to see when Luke and Leia had trained with each other. And through the use of some de-aging, we see a young Mark Hamill and a young Carrie Fisher doing some lightsaber combat with one another. But during that time, Leia sees a vision of Kylo Ren going to the dark side, so that's when she decides that she wants to stop her training because she doesn't want to be involved with the Force, if you will. But of course we know that ends up happening after. We see a scene so anyway, Rey so climactic parts here. The order I have reversed. But I thought it was cool. Luke takes his X-Wing, the Red 5 X-Wing, the classic one, that's in the water that we saw in The Last Jedi. He raises it out of the water and tells Rey that she needs to defeat Palpatine, or else everything will be lost. And so pretty much he's giving her the same pep talk that Obi-Wan Kenobi gave him in Return of the Jedi. He's giving it now to Rey, and so I thought that was a good point. Before Kylo Ren leaves the Endor system, and he watches Rey fly off, he hears a voice speak to him, and he turns around and it's Han Solo. And so and this is new footage, and Han Solo tells Ben that he forgives him, that everything's fine, he wants him to come home, and that he does not have to follow the dark side. And we see an almost mirror image of what happened in The Force Awakens. Ben is holding the lightsaber, and he says, I know what I need to do, but I don't have the strength to do it. Han puts his hand on Ben's face again, and he says, son, I'll help you. And so Ben, instead of this time killing his father, he takes the lightsaber and he throws it into the ocean. So he's giving up his old way. And then he turns around and Han Solo is gone. So it was just, it wasn't a Force vision anyway, it was just something in his mind. But I thought that was classic. So we've now seen Luke, Leia, and Han in this film together, and it felt more cohesive than what we had in The Force Awakens and in The Last Jedi. So that checked off that box for me. And so everything so far is checked off the box for me. Long story short, they need to destroy the Star Destroyer fleet that Palpatine has been building all of these years to build his final order. She goes back to the planet where the Resistance base was on. She learns that Leia has passed away. Maz Kanata is there. Chewie is upset. Lando is now there with them. Poe's not sure what to do. Lando gives him a pep talk. I thought that was fitting. Poe then takes over for Leia because at Leia's request. Poe makes Finn a general, and the pep talk for Lando being a general, like in Return of the Jedi. This was kind of like when Han and Lando became generals as well. So I thought that was pretty fitting. And anyway, I thought that was a nice touch. So the mission is in place. Rey says that she's going to find the Emperor, and they'll all go off together. Well, that's not what happens. Rey goes off on her own, but she's actually plotting the way to something like that. Anyway, I'm confusing some of it. But anyway, Rey plots the way with Red 5 of how to get to Exegol. And yeah, so actually Rey doesn't return. That's right. So Rey isn't there during that time. She doesn't get to see Leia's body. That's right. So my bad on that one. But our heroes get together in the Falcon, and Poe is in an X-Wing, and they're going to... Chewie and Lando are going to try to get more people to join the Resistance. Finn is on a mission to knock out a radio tower, which will allow the fleet to be released from Exegol. And Poe is leading a band of fighters to cover them. Rey is on her way to Exegol to take out the Emperor. Anyway, Rey confronts the Emperor. The Emperor says that she's his Empress, talks about the bloodline, etc. Palpatine is in rough shape. Rey says that she will not join him. And so it was good. It wasn't great. To sum it up, so that I can get to like the closing review part, what really ends up happening though is that Kylo Ren comes. The Knights of Ren are there. Trying to think of the exact. I got to see this movie a couple more times. I obviously I was at a screening. I couldn't take out my phone, so I couldn't write notes down that were there. But anyway, Rey has combat with the Knights of Ren. Kylo Ren has combat with the Knights of Ren, while Rey is dealing with Palpatine, who Palpatine is force lightning her, and she's blocking that with her lightsaber. What Rey does is that through their force link, she gives Luke's lightsaber to Ben. Ben with Luke's lightsaber, or Anakin's lightsaber, takes out the Knights of Ren easily. She then takes out Leia's lightsaber, and she's defending herself against Palpatine's lightning with that. Kylo Ren then shows up. That's when Palpatine talks about the two of them having a force bond, being part of the dyad. Palpatine goes to stop them and use his lightning on them, but then actually he sucks energy out of them, and by doing so he becomes young again. So he actually becomes about the condition that we saw him in Revenge of the Sith. So he's still withered up, but he seems to be in that same condition that was there. He's got the Sith eyes that are really glowing there. He says that your grandfather threw me off the cliff, and so I will do the same to you and end the Skywalker bloodline. So he force pushes Ben into an abyss. And then he says to Rey, you will strike me down. You will, you will join me or you will die. He doesn't actually need her anymore because he took the energy from Kylo and from Rey. So he will rule his own empire again, his final order. Rey is down on the ground while Palpatine is using his Force lightning to destroy the Resistance fleet. Because actually Lando has arrived with Chewie and thousands of ships, and they're now attacking the Sith Star Destroyers that are there. So Kylo's in the abyss, Rey is on the ground, and so Rey is then summoning the Jedi, asking for help. And we do then hear the voice of Mace Windu, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, of Anakin Skywalker, of Luke Skywalker, of Yoda, of Qui-Gon Jinn. And I read the credits, the final credits. These were the actual voices of the actors. It's unfortunate we didn't see them on screen, so that would actually be a negative. So whereas I've given it everything pluses so far, a negative is that they only used the voices of those actors. We didn't actually get to see them. And I think that would have been a nicer touch, in my opinion, because she's just looking up at the sky. If we had seen images, she's seeing the fleet being destroyed. But while she's calling to them, if we saw images of their face calling to her. But anyway, they're all saying basically, Rey, get up, you can do it, Rey, Rey. And so they're giving her the pep talk. She gets up, she takes the two lightsabers, she goes towards the Emperor. The Emperor is using the Force lightning and the two lightsabers, and just like in Revenge of the Sith, the Force lightning is bouncing back off at him. It's decaying his face. She continues to charge at him, and it ends up being too much for him, and he basically disintegrates from his own Force lightning and the power that's emanating back at him from the Anakin Skywalker lightsaber, which was Luke's now, and then also from the Leia lightsaber that she has crisscrossed. I thought it would have been a good touch if she had just chopped off his head the same way that Anakin had chopped off Dooku's, but we didn't get to see that scene. But this pushes Rey back, and Rey is back down on the ground, and she looks like she's done. That's when we see Kylo Ren emerge from the abyss. He crawls his way over to her. He then uses his Force power to revive her. And he looks fine, she looks fine. They stare into each other's eyes, and they kiss. So Reylo is a thing. And so now we can have Force babies. However, in that act, Kylo Ren dies. So he gave her all of his life essence to save Rey. And so then Kylo dies in her arms. So the reverse now happens. And then we see Kylo Ren's body fade away, just like how we saw Yoda's and Ben's before. And at the same time that Ben's body disappears, we see Leia's body disappear. So they both became one with the Force at that moment. So anyway, with Kylo Ren and Leia gone, Rey then looks up to the sky, and she sees that now that the Emperor is also gone, that the rebels have succeeded in defeating the First Order, the Final Order, the New Empire, whatever it is that you want to call them. And this was also done by a group effort of Lando and Chewie, of Finn, of the new character that we see riding the horses. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we see that everyone, they don't know whether Rey is alive or not, but then they see, Finn actually says that they see that that Red 5 is on the radar screen, so Rey must be alive. And they all go back to the planet where the Resistance base was at. And there we have a celebration similar to what we had at the end of Return of the Jedi. We see some different sequences similar to the special edition of Return of the Jedi, where Star Destroyers are defeated over Cloud City. We see Wicket and his girlfriend there from the Ewoks cartoon. And we see a Star Destroyer being destroyed again over Endor. And so the First Order's reign is now done, and the universe is celebrating. Did I mention Cloud City? Yeah, I did. I was actually surprised that the way they set up the scene, that the ship didn't smash into Cloud City. It's interesting that we haven't seen Coruscant at all. I think it would have been a good tie back to have shown that, or to have shown Naboo. If they were going to pay homage, that they could have gone all the way with it. Anyway, back on the Resistance base, everyone celebrates. Maz Kanata gives Chewie the medal that Leia had given to Han and Luke at the end of A New Hope. So Chewie was getting his medal in film canon, even though we were told that he received one anyhow off camera. We see Rey, Finn, and Poe give themselves a big hug. There's a nod to Rose Tico's character. We find out that Zori Bliss, the character who again had the purple and the gold helmet that had given them the key to that she's alive, and when she lands, Poe gives her a look. If you saw Jumanji, a joke in Jumanji, right, is that the Rock's character has that look. Well, Poe sort of does something like that, but it has no effect on Zori Bliss. Anyway, everyone celebrates just like they did at the end of Return of the Jedi. So fitting that it happened here in The Rise of Skywalker. And then we see a little bit later on that Rey goes to Tatooine, and she actually goes there on the Falcon, but we only see Rey and BB-8 get out. So this, I guess, was a bit of an homage to The Force Awakens with the two of them together on the Falcon on a desert planet. Anyway, she goes to the Lars homestead, and I'm surprised that no one else has moved in, but the home is empty. She walks over to the edge of, remember when Aunt Beru was yelling, "Luke, oh Luke," and so Luke calls down, and so Rey looks down into there, and that pit is somewhat filled with sand. She walks around a little bit, and then she takes the Skywalker lightsaber and the Anakin Skywalker lightsaber, the Leia Skywalker Solo, Organa, many hyphenated names for her lightsaber, and she wraps them up, ties them, and she uses the Force to sink them into the ground. And just as the ground covers up and collapses on that, a woman is walking by with an animal, and so she dismounts from that, where she was just leading it on. And so she says, "I haven't seen anybody here in a very long time. Who are you? What's your name?" And so she says, "I'm Rey." And the woman says, "Rey who?" And then there's a bit of a sandstorm happening. And so Rey turns around, and then she sees the Force ghost of Luke and a Force ghost of Leia. And Luke is in his Jedi robes that he had on Ahch-To, that we saw him in The Last Jedi and at the end of Force Awakens. And that's also what he was wearing when he is with Rey on Ahch-To in this film as well. Anyway, he's dressed in that way. Leia has an outfit on similar to what we saw her in A New Hope, white robes, and she has the hood on her head. And I don't remember if she's got the buns or not. But anyway, they look like they're their current age, but maybe just a little bit younger. And so what happens there is that when Rey looks at them and they look at her, she then turns around and she says, "I'm Rey Skywalker." And so Rey has now claimed the mantle of being a Skywalker. And so there are many analogies to why the name of this film is called The Rise of Skywalker. We saw a moment where Ben Solo he gave up being Kylo Ren at the time that he had the conversation with his son. When we saw when Kylo Ren had the conversation with Han Solo, and Han says, "Come home, you're now Ben Solo again." So he put that aside. So we saw Kylo Ren become Ben Solo, and that was the Skywalker rising. We saw Luke as a Force ghost. That was a Skywalker rising. We saw Ben emerge out of the abyss. That was a Skywalker rising. And of course, we see the Force ghost of Leia, another Skywalker rising. So then I guess the final Skywalker rising is now Rey Skywalker. So, okay. That was a long discussion about the film, I guess, me going over points of it. Let me give you what worked for me and what didn't work for me. What worked for me was the pacing of the film. The pacing of The Rise of Skywalker, it just works. Some might say it was choppy, but I think it moved there. It didn't delay, and so I thought that was a necessary element for the film. What worked for me was the initial setup. Excuse me. What worked for me was the initial setup of the Emperor being back and the bad guy. So that started right with the opening crawl. What worked for me is that him revealing himself to Kylo Ren and his intentions, and that started the story running. What also worked for me was the fact that we saw our heroes together on multiple journeys. So they were no longer separated, they were together. And I thought that was an important element. New characters were introduced in the form of Zori Bliss, in the form of even Dio. Obviously Palpatine is a new character to this sort of story. Lando, but they were treated well. R2-D2 didn't do a lot, but he was more involved in the story than he was in the Last Jedi. C-3PO certainly had a larger role than we've seen him in the past, which was good. I enjoyed that. So the pacing of the story was good. The direction was good. I thought the overall story was good. Acting was on point. The use of the Knights of Ren was good. Having a new the Allegiant General Pride was good to sort of reestablish a sort of a Tarkin-like figure, because unfortunately Hux had been diminished in The Last Jedi, but his character was still sorry, somebody was walking by. Hux's character was more properly used in this story, so I thought that was good. There wasn't a mockery of him as there was in The Last Jedi. The use of Leia, that's a good one to point on. I thought that it was done well. If you hadn't known that Carrie Fisher had passed away before this film, then you wouldn't know. So I thought that the footage that they did have of of Carrie Fisher to reuse as Leia was done quite tastefully. It benefited the story, and so yeah, I thought that was excellent. The role of Luke Skywalker was very short, but it was powerful, and he was well used. His reputation was rebuilt, which I thought was necessary. And I thought that was good. I thought the use of having Hayden Christensen, Liam Neeson, Samuel L. Jackson, Ewan McGregor, they also used Alec Guinness as well, and Frank Oz, those voices. Calling out to Rey in the Force was good, a nice touch as well too. So anyway, I thought that they treated the Emperor's character. Sorry for the us. It's almost 4 in the morning now. I got to cut some of these out. I thought the use of the Emperor was appropriate. and again, I mentioned I like how they established that early. The use of Lando was appropriate. Use of 3PO and R2-D2 was appropriate. So our original, and of course Leia and Luke. So, and having Harrison Ford back as Han Solo. All of these things were pluses for me. All right, what didn't I like about the story? Well, I guess what I didn't like about the story is I would have liked to have seen Anakin Skywalker play a part in this. I truly believe that Darth Vader was the character, and I understand that Ben Solo was that extension of Anakin Skywalker. However, I think it would have been fitting that the Force ghost of Anakin Skywalker, and especially we had seen in art for The Force Awakens that was not used, just sort of some reference art initially, was a sort of a phase shifting between Darth Vader and Anakin Force Ghost. I think that Anakin Skywalker, since he was a Force Ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi, should have been part of this story, either guiding Rey or guiding, and more appropriately, I think, Ben to do the right thing, because that would have, or at least it had him confront the Emperor in some way to tie up, that would have more appropriately, in my opinion, tied up that Skywalker legacy. Because Luke fulfilled what Luke was supposed to do, and Anakin did at the end of Return of the Jedi, but the fact that the Emperor had survived meant that Anakin, now being the chosen one, he needed to have a part in this. And so I really don't know why they did not utilize Hayden Christensen, who at Star Wars Celebration looked fine to me. I don't know what the thing is, why they're not utilizing him. He certainly should be utilized in the Obi-Wan series that'll be coming out onto Disney+. But all right, anyway, let me stick with Rise of Skywalker. So really, the only problem I have with the Rise of Skywalker was the non-inclusion of Anakin in the story. And they didn't explain how Palpatine survived, but it wasn't necessary. They explained Rey's parents just enough. So obviously she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. So her parents actually pretended to be nobody. They sold her to Unkar Plot on Jakku to hide her from Palpatine, because Palpatine wanted her to groom her and to be able to take over his empire. I guess maybe the Force powers skipped a generation, because there was no mention of whether or not her mother or father, I forgot which one, was the child of Palpatine, had the Force power or didn't. So that was not explained, but we did see in a flashback scene some of that. So yeah, all pluses for me. So again, just a quick recap. Pluses for me was the use of the original trilogy characters, including, that was all of them. So that was Han Solo, Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca played a big role in the film, C-3PO, his biggest in the sequel trilogy so far, and R2-D2 with Lando Calrissian, and then also including then the Emperor. So use of original and prequel trilogy characters, so well done. That's a thumbs up. The character development for Rey, Poe, and Finn, thumbs up. The story arc for Kylo Ren, thumbs up. The overall story, yeah, thumbs up. So the only problem, and then of course a sort of rehabilitation of Luke's character, rehabilitation of Hux, introduction of the, or use of Knights of Ren, the inclusion of new troopers, and I'm excited about that because being a Lego Star Wars fan, That means I'm going to get new Emperor's Royal Guards. There is all of this new Sith fleet had red on them. So there's tons of opportunities for new figures to be built. So toy collectors will be quite happy. I think that the idea of adapting sort of Death Star tech to a Star Destroyer to have it be a planet killer was reasonable. No problem with the story. No problem with the pacing of the story. The only thing, again, that I would have liked to have seen was Anakin Skywalker be the one to help motivate either Rey or Kylo Ren to advance in their determination of being on the light side to defeat Palpatine. But beyond that, good show. So I would like to congratulate J.J. Abrams, Chris Terrio, Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger for helming Disney Lucasfilm on this endeavor and bringing us a good, satisfying, in my opinion anyway, conclusion to the Rise of Skywalker, or conclusion to the Skywalker saga with the Rise of Skywalker. So I was impressed by that. Was it the best film in the franchise? No. Am I ready to put it in a ranking with them? No. Of the sequel trilogy, however, I can do that. Last Jedi would be the worst. I would probably put Force Awakens second, the middle film, and I would make Rise of Skywalker number one. So if I were going to rank the trilogy, I would probably do it that way. So I would say that the Rise of Skywalker was the best. Force Awakens would follow, with Last Jedi being the third. But I'm not about to put that into the ranking with the other six. And then, of course, if we want to include Rogue One and Solo in there. So I need to see the film a couple of more times to be fair about that. But I highly recommend this, and I encourage you to go out to see it. I also, the cast and crew did a fabulous job. I went to the premiere on an invitation with someone who works at Lucasfilm, and so I want to thank her for that. Thank you very much. And to you and your production team, that do the special effects work here at Lucasfilm in Singapore. You guys did a fabulous job. I know a number of those sequences were actually done here in Singapore because you told me that they were, and you deserve a lot of praise as well too. So I thoroughly enjoyed The Rise of Skywalker. I look forward to seeing it a couple of more times, and I will before it leaves theaters for sure. I already have tickets booked, and I encourage you to go and see it. This was a good, befitting finale to the Skywalker saga, and I look forward to more Star Wars to come. In particular, The Mandalorian. And in fact, the next video that I'm going to film will be my review of Chapter 7 of The Mandalorian. I just want to remind you that there's always something simmering on our storytelling stovetop. So please don't keep Marketing Kitchen TV a secret. I invite you to tell your family and friends about the channel. Please subscribe, please like, and please share it. I'm Ron Vining, your host, and this is Marketing Kitchen TV.